What's up, everybody? Vinu here with Fully Deconverted, and today we're going to be talking to a very interesting guest. He's a writer, and his name's Wrath. But right before we get to him, I just want to let everybody know that speaking of writers and books, we just put up on fullydeconverted.com on our Learn page. Go click on that in our tab, and you're going to find a book list that we just put up. So if you are new to atheism, you're wanting to learn more, or you're already an atheist or even a Christian and you want to know what atheism is, or you want to hear what atheists have to say about themselves or the movement, or even hear us talk about religion, go over to that page, fullydeconverted.com/learn. And you're going to find books by some writers. We'll be adding books there as time goes on. It's very easy. We already set up the links to Amazon if you want to reference those really quickly. They're set up right there for your convenience. Again, we'll be expanding that library as we go on. And without further ado, let's get right to our guest, Wrath. Introduce yourself, my friend.
Thanks for having me on. My name is Wrath James White. I am a horror writer. I write horror fiction. I also ran the blog Godless in Black for many, many years, and Words of Wrath also for many years. I write horror novels with an atheistic slant, a very erotic slant as well. So sex and horror is kind of an appropriate title for this talk.
Yeah, nice, man. Okay, so how did you get started writing, and why? Why did you choose your themes or discover your themes?
So that's a very long story. So I was always interested in writing horror.
Yeah.
Um, I was a philosophy major in college, and I wrote this. I had a very nihilistic philosophy,
Mm.
basically, and I suppose I still do. Um, and I wrote a book called sorry, not a book, a paper, 65-page paper called Existential Malaise, The Case Against Life, where I basically took all the major um, ideas of what the meaning of life was: living for God, living for love, living for to advance humanity, to advance your genetic line, and I debunked them one after another. And I
Yeah.
turned that in, and my philosophy professor loved it,
Mm.
but said, "You, unless you have a PhD, you can never publish this."
Why?
That was the thought at the time,
Yeah, yeah.
and so he said, "What you can do is write it as fiction
Mm.
and put everything that you just said here in the mouths of your characters, and you can publish it anywhere." So I've pretty much been doing that for the last 25 years.
That's an amazing workaround. Yeah, man, I love that actually, because so I'm a filmmaker. I've done commercial and activism filmmaking over the past couple of years. And I was a resident videographer for a church for a year before I deconverted. So I love telling stories, and I totally get that in your story, you can craft the narrative to send a very specific message to your audience, whether they're aware of it or not. And oftentimes with me saying this out loud, we might think of something like subliminal messages and that sort of thing, symbolism, the way you shape the arc of the characters, and the way you frame the shots. Everything can tell a story in filmmaking and with written narrative as well. So I love that. So you use that as an outlet for your ideas. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you mentioned subliminal messages. I don't think anyone who reads what I write would call anything I do subliminal. Um, I have been accused of writing with a sledgehammer.
Yeah.
Some of my work has been called atheist propaganda, so on and so forth. Um, my most popular novel, The Resurrectionist, which basically I took the idea of, if you accept that there's a benevolent deity, you have to also accept that there's some pretty powerful people who are evil, and you would who and let me explain what I mean by evil. Who
Yeah, yeah.
knowingly cause harm to others.
Mm,
Knowingly cause harm to others. That's what I would call an evil. Um, and when you accept that those two things exist, that there's an all-powerful being, and then there's a bunch of really powerful people who cause harm to others, you have to wonder why. And so in this book, I imagine, what if you had someone with the power of a Jesus Christ who was completely evil, in this case, a serial killer.
mm.
And yeah, it was fun. I went pretty far with that idea. And I write extreme horror, so I don't really hold much back.
Man, I wish I could have got a hold of one of your books beforehand, just to taste a little bit. Let me ask you this: odds are you haven't read this. There's a million books out there. Have you ever read the novel? Um, what is it called? The Iceman.
By hold on a second. I am going to crap. I thought I had it here.
You know what I'm talking about? Like the Polish mafia guy.
What is yes, yes, yes. What is his name?
Man, his name is just escaping me right
It is,
now.
and I have the book here somewhere, but it would take up half your time here if I was looking for it.
Yeah. Yes, and they made a movie on this too. It might be able to be found on Netflix. It's called The Iceman. The movie, and I think the guy that started the movie was actually on Superman as General Zod. Same character. But you watch the movie, man, it's nothing. It's nothing. When you read the novel, and this is like based on, I don't know how real, but based on the actual, I mean, what is his name? Anyways, that was the most violent book I have ever read. I mean, it was bad. But you know what book I'm talking about. What is your material like compared to that?
um, I make that look like Disney, but
I love
so,
that, man. Okay, so let's jump into your material, man. Like I want to get in this stuff. I want to figure out what you're about. Take me to a place of how graphic your stuff gets. Paint me a picture.
so I have a I have an opinion that when someone buys a novel,
Mm,
at least certainly one of my books, that there's this conceit among writers that you have to leave certain things to the imagination. I
yeah.
believe that readers come to my work looking for my imagination. So if
Uh,
I leave it to their imagination, I'm cheating. So I describe in minute detail every act. When, in those old 50s horror movies, when you're waiting the whole time to see the monster
yeah, yeah,
and you get like one glimpse of the monster at the very end and then it's done. Or you
yeah,
see a monster with these huge teeth and claws and so on and so forth, and he strangles someone or just tosses them around. That
yeah,
doesn't happen in my books. That monster with the gnashing teeth and the claws is shredding someone.
yeah.
um, when I write a novel about serial killers, because one thing you'll notice is if you watch movies about serial killing, they always cut things out. They
Mm,
always cut things out. Um, Ted Bundy actually engaged in some cannibalism.
mm.
You wouldn't know that unless you read his stuff, unless you read actual his actual works. You see him; he did strangle a bunch of people, but he also took trophies and engaged in a little cannibalism. In my
Mm,
book, you would see all of that. And in fact, my first novel, Succulent Prey, was about a serial killer who achieved sexual release through cannibalism,
mm.
and it was a work of what I would call erotic horror.
Yeah.
And that one will probably never get made into a movie. However, The Resurrectionist did get made into a movie. The movie's called Come Back to Me, and it was on Netflix. I know it's on Amazon, but I don't think it's on Netflix anymore. But one thing that disturbed me about the movie compared to the book is very graphic.
Mm,
It basically shows the theme of it is someone who has the power of a Jesus Christ type character to resurrect the dead.
Mhm.
Only he's a serial killer and he's obsessed with a particular woman. He rapes and murders her every night, brings her back to life, and she has no recollection of the acts that happened. And then gradually she begins to piece things together, clean sheets on the bed, her nightgown has been changed, bloody clothes in the laundry machine, clean spots on the floor, and she starts to have nightmares, and she starts piecing together that maybe these nightmares are actually true. The movie captures that part, but leaves out what actually happens to her. In the book, it does not. I describe it in minute and graphic detail because that's what my readers expect.
Man, okay. I'm going to restate what you just said. So a woman every night gets raped and murdered,
Yes.
restarts the next day. And that's it, right? In a nutshell.
Yeah. He brings her back to life, but she has no memory of being murdered, no memory of it. But she has these nightmares. She starts having these nightmares in which she's murdered. Obviously, she's alive, so she thinks she must be crazy. But then she starts finding little clues, and the whole book is about her trying to convince her husband and these two detectives that this is really happening, and her neighbor is murdering her every night. The movie makes it kind of leaves it a little bit more of a mystery. There's no mystery in the book.
I got you. I mean, that sounds interesting already just as a concept. Okay, so that's The Resurrectionist. It did come on Netflix.
Yes.
Awesome. So when as you've written your horror and sex themed novels, how do you incorporate atheism into any of that?
Well, if we go back to that novel alone, and this is one thing that they did leave in the movie, where the main character, the main antagonist, his mother asked the question, why would God give the power of Christ to a devil, to someone who is evil?
Yeah.
Well, you just think, if you go down to the smallest, to let's say just a parent who abuses their child, to that child, their parent is almost a godlike figure.
Yeah.
And they have godlike authority and power over that child. But yet they're allowed to have children. They're allowed by our society, but more importantly, if you are religious, then you have to accept that God allowed for this horrible person to have a child. Someone who was abusive, maybe sexually abusive, allow them to have a child. And you have to ask then, what type of God would do that? And so that's kind of what I explored in The Resurrectionist. I also have a collection of short stories called Horrible Gods. And that one's, I do the same thing. I take the idea that, let's say God exists. And, it's sort of, most of my books kind of take the evidential argument from evil and just blow them out of proportion, because I'm a horror writer. And just blow them out of proportion. And ideas like, let's see. I'm gonna grab the book.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's Horrible Gods. And so I start by allowing that God exists. And then you take things like Munchausen by Proxy is one of my favorite short stories. And it's basically, again, an explanation of the evidential argument from evil, where in this, a God exists and he wants people to love him or her, and does so by causing torment and then also setting themselves up as the cure for that torment. And if you believe that there's a God that exists, then that's a pretty that scenario is a possibility that you have to accept also.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounds quite like Christianity.
it sounds very much like Christianity.
Yeah.
Worship me and I will save you from the hell that I created for those who don't worship. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah. Some of my favorite quotes is Jesus knocking on the door and the person saying, what? Jesus saying, "Let me in," and they're like, "Why should I let you in?" To stop me from doing what I'm going to do to you if you don't let me in.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's a some of my there are themes of BDSM and stuff in my writing as well, and that
Yeah.
whole master slave dynamic is entirely consistent with all the Abrahamic religions, in fact.
Mm.
And being a black person, this is one of the things I used to discuss on my blog, is not just that uh, those religions condone slavery, that the Old Testament condones slavery, but also the entire idea of this paternal God figure that's all powerful and
Mm.
demands your worship, and his word is law, and the very definition of good is whatever his will is
Yeah.
offensive to anyone who has should be offensive to anyone who has a ancestral history of slavery. Why
Yeah.
would you willingly put yourself into a master slave relationship like that?
Mm.
It's and yeah, I talk about that in my writing quite a bit as well.
So now let's switch over then. So we just struck an atheist theme. Let's educate our audience a little bit on the BDSM side. What does it mean to be a master and slave on the BDSM in the BDSM community?
So that is, for one, it's 100% consensual, and it's not to suggest that Christianity is anything but consensual, except the fact that in BDSM it's two adults consenting to do this. They haven't been indoctrinated since childhood, so there's a
Yeah.
different element to it. You know, and well, let's hope that they haven't been indoctrinated since childhood. And there is a payoff for both participants, whether that's sexual, emotional, or whatever. There's someone who enjoys having aspects of their life controlled, and someone who enjoys controlling those aspects of their life.
Mm.
I know some people who are have in very powerful positions in their life, CEOs of companies, prosecutors, policemen, so on and so forth, who at the end of the day, they want to relinquish that power. They've spent all day
Yeah.
controlling everything. And at the end of the day, they want to relinquish that power.
Absolutely.
And
Let me ask you why. Let's talk about that. Why do they want to give over that power? Because most humans are fighting after that position of control and that power. Why somebody in that position? Why would they ever want to give that up? Why?
and that's why, is because they do spend all day, every day fighting for that power.
Yeah.
And to now be in a position when they come home where they no longer have to fight, they can relax. Letting go of that struggle and letting go of that power is how they relax.
Yeah.
And so they can now kind of shed that Shark Tank mentality for a few hours, a few minutes, whatever, and relinquish power to someone else. It helps them restart, helps them relax. And
Oh, okay. Now, Wrath, wait just a minute now. I'm getting an idea.
Mhm.
Is that what God did when he became Jesus?
You know, well, if you believe that, I suppose that would offer a good explanation.
I mean, God's up there for a few thousand years or a few million or a few billion or whatever you believe, right? And the God's like, damn it, you know what? Like, it's time. It's time I turn myself over for a little while and just have a fling of it, right? And then, just a little bit of torture, a little bit of whip action, you know.
Well, have you watched? I assume you have, The Last Temptation of Christ. It's a snuff film. I mean, it is sadistic porn, in my opinion.
It's right
No
up your
plot.
alley, right?
Exactly. It has virtually no plot. It assumes that you already know the story, so let's just get into the gore.
Yeah.
If I wrote a book like that, I would get trashed all over every literary circle,
Yeah.
because there's already that idea that what I write is just torture porn with no story.
Mm.
So I have to make sure that the characters are strong, the story is strong to resist that categorization. But here we have a mainstream movie that just said, to hell with plot, let's just get into the gore," which, on some levels I admire. That they
Yeah,
got away
right.
with
Yeah, if you can make it successful, right? And it must have been in the marketing, right? The people who simply believe and want to see it visually and want that affirmation that
that.
God absolutely suffered for us, and who wouldn't want to see their favorite story, or the one that gives credence to their hope, depicted
Mhm.
visually. That's what we all. When I was a Christian, just so you know, deconverted about a year ago. I already mentioned I was involved in church. Yeah. It's funny. I was at the American Atheist convention. I'd just come out. I asked a question to a speaker. I let everybody know I was a documentary filmmaker and that I had just come out, and I was asking a question. Right when I said that, like everybody started clapping. They're like, "Ah, yeah, you're no longer a believer and you're out." And they,
That did not happen when I came out.
I want to ask you about that in just a second. But yeah, so I'm thinking of The Passion by Mel Gibson. Is that the same movie you're thinking about? Or are you thinking of another one?
The Passion of the Christ, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So
Did I
and
say
then
Last Temptation? My fault. Yeah, I meant the Passion of the Christ.
The Passion, right? And when I saw that, I'm like, "Wow, man, this is like a powerful, and I was satisfied with it. Like I wanted. If you make like a 3 hour, saga out of this, like they tried in the 1980s or 70s or whenever
Mhm.
Charles Heston did it, I think is his name.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I don't think it was the 60s, 70s, 80s. Well, anyways, you know.
No, it wasn't the 80s. It was, it was like the 60s, I believe, that came out.
Okay, yeah. That's too long, man. I want to get right into the grit. That's how we are now. We want to get right into the grit, and
Yeah.
yeah, I guess you can get away with that. But if you're reading a novel, today, you
But you
want that
shouldn't
story
have
arc.
been
You
able to
want that
get
best.
away with that as a filmmaker. You shouldn't have been able to get away with that as a filmmaker, only because the mythology is so prevalent in our society and our culture
Yeah.
that you were able to do that. Like you were able to go, you know the story. Like that's the only way that you were able to do that. Because that is, in my opinion, that is really shoddy filmmaking to just toss the plot out like that. But I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I mean you're right. I mean, even when I was watching it, the plot was assumed. Like we all have read the Bible or know the story or whatever. I shouldn't say we've all read the Bible. My God. Why would I say that? Because people usually don't. But anyways, they know the story.
True.
So
True.
all that's presumed, and we just want to see the action part, And it was very well done for what it was. But you're right. No real plot, no real character development, just straight into it. Okay, now I'm curious. When you're building up your plot and your character arcs,
Mhm.
how do you draw suspense when it comes to introducing the sexual moments? And are those sexual moments tied to like the sinister moments, or are they sometimes like more natural, like things that we might encounter every day? Or do you like, no, they're going with my sinister moments? How do you do that?
It really varies from book to book. I mean, there's sometimes where the sex is the horror. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The characters are, whether it's sex between a protagonist and an antagonist, or whether it's just a intimate moment between two characters that or assume going to be interrupted by something that's going to put their lives in peril.
Mm.
That is more when it's two potential victims who are in an intimate moment and the audience knows that it's about to get horrible. That's right there is the suspense. It's that
Yeah.
whole Alfred Hitchcock thing of the bomb under the table, whether you just let it go off and shock everyone, or if you show them the bomb under the table through the entire meal, so the audience knows it's there and they're going, "Oh my God, get up from the table, the bomb's gonna go off." Well, if you have someone, let's say, having sex with the villain of the story, the antagonist, who everyone knows is a sexual predator or a serial killer or a monster of some sort,
Mm.
and everything is nice and pleasant and everything is romantic and beautiful, but the audience knows any minute now it's going to get horrible.
Yeah.
And and my readers know that. They know that 100% that it's going to go bad.
When I do storytelling, you can only do it so much as you're allowed with the content available to you, right? But one of the principles I try to use is contrasting emotions. So just like you, and I don't think there's anything new by any means, but you have that pleasant scene, and then you want things to go dark because you satisfy the audience's desire to see something hope fulfilled.
Yes.
But in the next scene, you need to grab their attention again. You can't let this go on forever. You gotta grab their attention again, and you gotta crush that hope. And so you gotta take them this way, that roller coaster there. So I'm imagining you employ that roller coaster, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's fun. I mean, it's, as an artist, I think our job is to manipulate emotions. That's what we do. We play with people's emotions. And I think the degree of an artist's success is the degree at which we're able to play those emotions in the exact manner that we wish. If we're trying to create fear, that we create it. If we're trying to create joy or sadness, that we're able to elicit those responses. That's how in my mind, that's the only judge of success for an artist, not how much money they make or how popular it is. There's a lot of garbage that's popular, but it's how successful were you at evoking the exact emotion you're trying to evoke. That's how I judge my art.
Yeah, that's what an audience wants, right? They want to know that their stuff is valuable to the audience that they were writing it for. Yeah, completely agreed, 100%. Man, I want to focus on your work, but the more we talk about the subject, I can't help but imagine at the same time, as we're talking about it, I'm like, maybe that's what the writers of the Bible were doing. Maybe that's the people who were in charge of the political decisions regarding Christianity were doing. They need this catch on their audience's attention, like, hey, whoa. Don't not give money to us. Don't not pay us respect. After all, if you do so, you'll go to hell.
Hope and fear are the twin pillars of any totalitarian society, and that's what was around at that time. And that's what if you read the Bible, that is the biblical ideal, is basically a totalitarian society with God as the dictator. And so equal doses of hope and fear is how you keep people in line. And so that's why the Bible plays that rather well. But if you read the Bible as a book, supposedly written by a infinite intellect, it is very poor. I mean, it
falls quite short. Yeah.
It falls very short. I mean, it offers no revolutionary ideas about politics, science, medicine, not even, societal relationships, love relationships. There is nothing revolutionary in that book. So even as a novel written by a infinite intellect, it would fall short. I know I can name a dozen authors off the top of my head who could write a better book.
Yeah, right. Okay. So hope and fear. That is at least today's message of Christianity. Hey, you didn't know this, but you're sick and you're going to hell. You're going to suffer eternally because an all-powerful God created things this way. And that's horrific for a fragile mind or a gullible mind to hear. And then you get this other twin pillar over here called hope, and you say, you didn't know that you were sick, but you are. Good news. In my other hand, I have the cure, and the cure is you have to believe, and if you believe, then you're cured. So you have just capitalized on everything that every single artist tries to capitalize on with their audience in one sitting of evangelizing to someone who, if they're not critical in evaluating your claim, the proselytizer's claim, they'll absolutely just be torn emotionally, just like that. And they're like, "Oh my goodness, maybe I am sick." That's what we all do, right? When we see those infomercials come on and talk about something we didn't know about previous to, we're like, maybe the bacteria in my gut needs to be regulated. I need to go buy bacteria pills and whatever else is out there. I need to do this diet or whatever the next fad trend thing is. And
that's the thing is with the reason why all of the religions that come from that tradition have that hammer behind them. They have that threat of damnation, that threat of punishment or torture, because it makes people afraid to disbelieve. It makes them afraid to use the critical thinking skills. My ex-wife was a Christian when we met. She would read my blogs, read my books, hear me debate, and one day her mother decided that she wanted to debate. Yeah, and it was god awful. It was terrible. She was completely unprepared.
Yeah.
Now, what was fascinating was that my ex-wife kept interrupting to argue against the points her mother was bringing up. She knew the answer to all of the Christian apologist arguments. And so after it was all over, I asked her, I said, if you know that all that stuff is wrong and you know the responses and the arguments against them, why do you still call yourself a Christian? How can you continue to believe? And her answer was, because she's afraid not to.
Yes. Yep.
That's what keeps them. That's what keeps them there. That's what keeps them there.
I think a good number. I want to say less than 50% of people that I actually have conversations and experiences with, but a good amount still demonstrate something like what you just said. We just had on Alex O'Connor of the Cosmic Skeptic on yesterday, and he was even relaying some of that. You still have some of that fear that is a vestige of the religious plague that was placed in our minds. That even when you
and I'll go one further, is that there's also a fear of being ostracized by society,
absolutely,
and culture and family. One of the first things, the whole reason I started the blog Godless in Black was because I had written an article called The Invisibility of the Black Atheist on my own personal blog, and it got reprinted everywhere. In fact, it even got quoted in the New York Times at one point.
Nice.
And the whole point was that there are so many Black atheists who still go to church, have not to their families, because they are so terrified of being ostracized by them. I mean, when in our culture, looking for the good Christian man is, I mean, it's iconic. It's everywhere. If I were to go to any woman in my family and ask, what type of man are you looking for? Good Christian man. And so a Black man who is interested in remaining a part of the culture and dating within that culture is going to come out as an atheist and basically reduce his chances of finding a woman. And vice versa. It's not just strictly a Black male thing. But Black women as a group are the most religious people in this country. They go to church more often. They stay in church longer, and in Black culture, they are charged with being the stewards of the culture, basically, but with
Mm.
passing on the history and the traditions and everything else to the children. And so there's a lot more pressure, even even more so than there are for Black men. There's more pressure for Black women to remain in the church,
Yeah.
uh, because and it's such a bizarre thing that slavery led to Christianity, and now there is the idea that to not be a Christian is somehow to be not Black,
Yeah.
which is an insane perversion of history. Uh,
You know, Wrath, I've totally noticed that when I started off deconverting and I started talking to people, 25% of the persons that I talked to were Black, and they would communicate exactly what you're communicating, and that's something that I never thought about before. It's obviously not something that I'm right in the middle of. It's something that I hadn't considered. I wasn't exposed to that, but I was getting that, and it makes sense. I guess that's as much as I can say about it now, but yeah, I can confirm what you're saying.
yeah, yeah, and it goes even further. Even when a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, Christianity is a slave religion," I'm letting that go, and I'm going to become uh, Muslim, or I'm going to adopt
Right.
Islam. Islam came to Africa at the point of a sword. It was, I mean, the transatlantic slave trade lasted, what, 400 years, 200 years? The trans-Saharan slave trade lasted 800 years.
Mm.
You know, in fact, slavery in the Middle East officially ended in the 60s, the
Mm.
1960s. Um, Unofficially, it still goes on today. You know, sexual slavery in that form still goes on today. But
Mm.
yet there's still this idea that it's somehow more Black than Christianity. And it's absurd. And I got a lot of flack for that. I wrote an article about called "Islam is Not the Black Man's Religion" on my blog, Godless is Black. And that got probably more hits from more places than
Yeah,
you know, and more angry comments than anything else I'd written.
I hear you. Um, so why sex, man? Why is sex? What? Yeah,
so,
you know.
so
My mind just keeps going back. Like, we punch people in the face with this hell heaven, you know, 1-2
yeah,
punch,
yes.
and then right in the middle of that, right when we have people captivated, and we've caught their attention, and we've got their culture, and we've impregnated their minds, you know, with that combo punch. We introduce one of the craziest ideas, and it's the fact that we try to regulate their sexual behavior.
And you know why?
What? Yeah, why?
It's because just what you said earlier is you're sick and here's the cure. We all have sexual desires. So if you look at the Bible, um, and I keep going back to the Old Testament because you know Islam, Judaism, Christianity all sprang from it.
Yeah.
It doesn't just have admonitions against sex, but also something else you can't control, and that's your hunger and what you eat. So it has a bunch of things that you're not supposed to eat that you're probably going to, excuse my language, but you're probably going to eat.
Yeah.
So that now you can feel guilty for it and you can go to the church who has the cure for your feelings of guilt. Well, the same thing with sex. You really think that no one's going to masturbate? Of course, they're going to masturbate. I masturbate constantly. So
Right.
of course they are.
Yeah.
You really think that someone who has feelings for the opposite, for the same sex is not going to act on those feelings? Of course they are.
Right.
But now they have that feeling of guilt. And guess what? Oh, you can come here. Make sure you tithe.
Yeah.
And we will help alleviate those feelings of guilt.
You know,
It's
Raph.
demonizing things that you cannot control and cannot stop.
Yeah. You know, right? I've never actually heard somebody draw that parallel with the eating thing. And I feel like I should have noticed that forever ago. But yeah, no, thank you for pointing that out. I mean, it seeks to control
Mhm.
those things which we have appetites for, though. I mean, those things which we were just
Absolutely.
designed for. I never thought about that before. I'm gonna think about that more now. But I always thought, man, our biological urges, and now I'm going to talk about hunger too. Those things which we won't do without. Like there's no doing without it. There's no not being attracted. There's no not having romantic feelings or thoughts.
Mhm.
Um, there's no not fantasizing about eating when you're hungry.
Exactly. And if
Um,
your and if your religion forbids seafood, and you're in an area where the most plentiful food happens to be seafood,
yeah,
you're going to tell me you're not going to have some shrimp or some crab? Of course you are. And then you're
of
going to feel
course you
guilty
are.
about it, and you're going to go to church. If the
Yeah,
most plentiful thing in the area are wild hogs, but your religion forbids the eating of those, you're not going to eat them? Of course you are. You're going to eat them in private. You're going to feel guilty about it. And then you're going to pay some priest to tell you that it's okay, and that all you have to do is ask for forgiveness, and you're okay. You know, it is such a so one of the things I talked about a lot with my friends is
mm,
growing up in an area. I grew up in Philadelphia,
mm.
inner city Philadelphia, and the con men and hustlers were very prevalent. I grew up in the '80s, and some of the same tricks that the con men and hustlers used, basically preying on your greed, is the same thing that you see Sunday morning the televangelists use. The same damn
Oh
tricks.
yeah, absolutely.
And the same people who are savvy to the street hustler fall victim to the religious hustle.
Gosh, you're so right, man. Come on, people, wake up. Oh, you exactly right. Every televangelist, man, even the churches around here, the churches everywhere, right? If they talk about money at all, they're usually going to say the same thing everybody else is going to say, and it's give money to get money. Now, some might take it as far as be like, it might not be a financial return on your financial gift to
And
us, but you're getting something. But how are we supposed to measure that now?
exactly. And even you talk about that in terms of those who are trading paradise for you sacrificing now. But
Mm.
the most popular preachers aren't using that message anymore. The most popular preachers are the prosperity preachers who are saying, if you give me money now, I guarantee you that God is going to reward you and make you wealthy.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
they're preying on the very poorest and the least educated who cannot see any other way out of their situation, out of their poverty. And so they're going, yeah, well, I believe in God. I believe that God's all powerful. So I'm going to give this person who says that they have a direct channel to God money, and God's going to help lift me out of poverty. Hasn't worked for anyone I know yet, but yet, Creflo Dollar is walking around in $4,000 suits and flying around in
Exactly.
a
Hey,
multi-million-dollar jet.
come on, wake up,
Benny
people.
Hinn and all
If
those guys.
if giving money to the church or to anybody actually made you prosperous,
Mhm.
it would be working everywhere. It'd be a 1-2 solution. It'd be a 1-2 step. It wouldn't be this complicated, just have faith, all this up, blah, 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 blah. Wouldn't be
Yeah,
all that. Everybody would be going to church. Everybody would be giving money. And
and there would be
everybody
no
that
need.
did would be prosperous. Bottom line.
Exactly, exactly. But yet we have generations. My great grandmother, she gave money to Father Divine. Her daughter, my grandmother, gave money to Reverend Ike. My mother, sends money to, I don't know, Benny Hinn or whoever
Yeah.
the latest charlatan is.
Gonna send it to
And
somebody, might as well be Benny Hinn.
exactly. And generation after generation after generation, still in the same situation, still praying to the same damn people,
Yeah.
still sending money to these charlatans, and not once does anyone question, why hasn't this worked? You know, it's delusion. Hello. Looks like I lost you. All right, I got you back. Hello. Hmm. We seem to be having some technical difficulties here.
All right, if you guys are on here, I could try to get Wrath back on.
All right.
What's going on? You back on, man?
Yes.
Hey,
What?
sorry about that, man. All
No
right.
problem.
We'll get this resumed going on here. Okay. Where were we at? We were talking about prosperity preachers.
Yes, and how generations after generations fall for that same trick and yet never be lifted out of their situations and wonder why those situations don't improve.
Yeah.
Yet,
I'm gonna tell two quick stories.
all right.
Super quick. I tested that out as an adult for 10 months, tithing, and I was so legalistic about it. Like, if I got income from any source, I did no less than 10%. And I tested that to see what would happen. You're imagining kind of what Malachi has to say, like the floodgates of heaven are going to open and you're just going to have all these blessings from heaven and, everything that we make it out to be in Christian culture.
Yes.
Didn't happen. All right. So I'm just going to leave that right there for everybody else. The person who actually does get rich and it's not just a one-time off type thing, please introduce me to your community. I will start attending church there. All right. Because even if it's just for prosperity, we'll do that. I can suffer through some bad delusions for about a year while I build up some wealth. I can do that. All right. Number two, I watched family members of mine who you described perfectly when you were kind of painting the picture on what type of persons get preyed on.
Mm-hmm.
And I seen them give, they were not well-off family members of mine. I was at church with them. I was younger. I was a teenager. I seen them give like their last $20, man. And somebody else who knew they were not poor. And this is like a church that's calling for like their second offering, their love offering. And like it was ridiculous. It's too much money already.
Yes.
And then somebody that knew them saw them give their money away, came up to my family members, gave them money. You know what my family members did with that money?
They gave it back to the church.
They gave it back to the church, man. Come on, man. Come on. Like, this stuff doesn't work. Like, you don't there's no natural law that says when you give away, you somehow have that replaced supernaturally with more. Like, that doesn't happen. Nowhere in the universe does that happen. It simply doesn't happen.
No. And the whole idea that mega churches exist and yet their congregation usually tends to not be of the wealthiest folks in the world. But yet you have these preachers driving off in Mercedes, driving to their private jets, wearing their $6,000-$7,000 suits with tens of thousands of dollars worth of jewelry on.
Yeah.
And no one questions it. I mean, no one within that congregation questions it. Obviously, we question it from outside, but looking at it from outside, it is very difficult to see how those within that cannot question it. Like my grandmother, she passed away a few years ago, but she, I was talking to her, and I tread lightly with my grandmother.
Yeah.
Right? I was talking to her about prosperity preachers, and she was talking about the one she likes and the one she doesn't like. She goes, yeah, you know, I like Creflo Dollar, but he's too expensive for me. And I really wanted to dive into that. And I treaded lightly around it. And you know, I said, well, what do you mean? Well, he's always asking to send money and send this and send that. There was a quote from him that he wanted to install these booths that you had to walk through, and they would have some kind of a lie detector type system set up. And if you did not tithe 10% at least, that you would be executed.
What?
He said this on air.
Excommunicated?
No, executed. That there would be execution squads who would kill you if you did not tithe.
That's great. That's already in the realm of ridiculousness.
People ask me where I get my stories from stuff like that. Right there.
Man, that's a real life horror story right there. Financially.
Right now. Yeah, you can Google it right now, and it's him live on an interview. I can't remember if it was 60 Minutes, but it was something like that. Him live on an interview saying this. You know?
That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. What do you think people in a position of power like that, where they have an audience that is captive to their every word, and they know their audience too, because the leaders, they know how much the audience is giving. Like, they know the stats. They follow those, I mean, religiously, right? What people in positions of power like that, what do you think? How do you think they deal personally with sexuality?
So I was always of the belief that if you don't indulge certain desires, then they become obsessions, and obsessions lead you to do to set morality aside in some areas. And
Yeah.
I think when you look at all the scandals that have plagued the church, and I don't just mean the Catholic Church. I'm talking Southern Baptists who are, you know, Southern Baptist preachers who get caught up in, you know, hiring male prostitutes with wives in the congregation. You know, all these type. When I was growing up, so when I was growing up, there were preachers who everyone knew they were sleeping with people in the congregation's wives.
Yeah.
They knew it. They knew it. Oh, that preacher, he's a dog. You know, they knew it. But as long as, you know, but something about Christianity, they love a redemption story. And so as long as he got up there and he confessed and said, you know, I've got these weaknesses, but I come to the Lord and he forgives me, everyone claps and cheers.
Yeah. You know? Is that because the congregation wants to vicariously see the consequences played out on the minister as they would have those consequences played out on themselves?
I don't know. I think they want to believe that, because Christianity, the whole idea of Christianity is that all your sins can be forgiven. That's the big sell. That's the product that they're selling. And so the bigger the sinner, the bigger the forgiveness, the product. And so that's why it's particularly in Southern Baptists, that's why the redemption stories are so huge. I mean, there are ex-pimps, ex-drug dealers who are successful preachers now because they have the best redemption story. I was a drug dealer. I sold this. I did, you know, I committed sin. I was an ex-homosexual. I was an ex-pimp. I was an ex-this person. I was an ex-that person. But I came to the Lord and he forgave me, and now all my sins are forgiven, and I'm going to tell you how to do it too. It's a good story. It's a good story. You know, I had a conversation with my mother, who, by the way, is a preacher.
Oh yeah, I like this already.
Yeah. So, which is a funny story. We'll get to my deconversion in a minute, but it's a funny story in itself. I went to her church because I do. When I'm in town, I
Yeah.
like, and she knows that I'm going to criticize everything I see. But I think she's hoping that one day it'll all sink in. So I go to her church, and there was a play going on, and the play was redemption stories. Basically, that wasn't the name of it, but that was the theme, and it was a woman who was wild and run the street using drugs, who got saved by Christ,
Mhm.
and another woman who was, or a man who was a criminal who got saved by Christ. The third person was a lesbian woman who got saved by Christ.
Yeah.
And I talked to my mother, and I said, and she asked me afterwards, she goes, "What did you think of the play?" I said, "Well, I found it extremely offensive." And
Mm.
she said, "Well, why did you say that?" I said, "Because you equated homosexuality with drug use and
Yep.
being a violent criminal." "Yeah,
Exactly.
but they saved her. She was accepted." I said, "Well, you're saying that it's wrong." And she could not understand it. She kept saying,
Mhm.
"But yeah, but we accepted her and we helped cure her." It's like, you're saying it's a disease. You're
Mhm.
saying that it's something that she should be ashamed of, that she need to get help from. I said, now imagine if you're a adolescent or a teenager sitting in the audience who's struggling with their sexuality, and you see this play in which you're told that this is an evil that you need to get cured of.
Yeah.
What do you think that says? And she kept saying, "But yeah, but we cured her." The play was
Come
about
on.
how she was accepted and cured. And she could not understand how it was sending the counter message that this was an evil that she needed to be rid of, on par with drug use and criminality.
Oh, yeah, exactly. No, there's no critical thought on those things when it comes to someone who's been indoctrinated for the better part of their life. There's no critical thinking of sending that counter message at all. They're only thinking, "Oh, it's bad, now it's good."
Yes, exactly, exactly. And so here's a story about. So when I was 12, I read the Bible,
Yeah.
and I found it. I read it cover to cover, and I thought it was ridiculous, and I thought, maybe I am just not smart enough to understand it.
Right.
So I continued to believe, went to church, did all that stuff like the rest of my family did. Then when I was 17, I read it again, cover to cover,
Mm.
and I damn near threw it against the wall.
Yeah.
I was so embarrassed, personally embarrassed and offended, that I had believed this nonsense for so long. I felt like someone had gotten over on me. Like, I felt like the victim of the biggest con, and I was enraged. Like
Yeah.
I always say, when people say, "Oh, you came out of the closet," no, I came out of the cage. I came out snarling and angry, because
Yeah.
I felt I was personally embarrassed, that I felt like I gotten over on.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I wound up, when I went to college, I was a creative writing major, and I wound up changing my major to philosophy. And because I was looking, I said, "Well, surely someone has other answers out here. Maybe I'm wrong and I'm seeing something." And the more I read, the more ridiculous it all seemed.
Mm.
And so I would call my mother up, and I would tell her about the things I was learning and reading and researching and experiencing. And she would debate with me a bit about these things. And I always tell people the traditional story of how people uh, lost their faith, um, is, I grew up in a really Christian family, and then I rebelled from it. My mother, the preacher's child or the preacher's kid. Well, my mother wasn't a preacher yet.
Mm.
My mother became a preacher after years and years of debating religion with me. And I always say that she rebelled against me, and that's what drove her to the church.
Oh,
You
wow.
know? She got more and more interested in, because she was committed to this belief,
Right.
unshakably committed to it. And she found, in my opinion, this is just my interpretation of it, that she found herself struggling to combat the arguments that I was presenting her with.
Right.
And so she kept going to the Bible looking for answers, and that led her into studying further and then wound up getting into the church. We finally stopped having debates when I asked her one question. I said, let me ask you a question. How would you know if God stopped loving? And she said, well, God wouldn't stop loving. Okay. How would you know if he did? How would you know if he stopped loving all of us? Would hundreds of thousands of kids a day die of curable illnesses and diseases? Because that happens right now. Would there be, thousands of people destroyed in natural disasters? Because that happens right now. What would it be that would let you know that God had stopped loving human beings? So, well, there is nothing. He would never stop. I said, well, there you go. That's why we could never have an argument. Because in order for a proposition to be correct, like God loves me, there has to be a situation under which it would be false. And if you cannot tell me what that situation is, then we can never have a real discussion.
That's amazing thought experiment.
Yeah. And that was the last time we had that discussion.
Yeah, wow. That's a powerful proposition to offer to somebody to engage in that thought experiment right there. Wow. I'm going to use that in the future, by the way. The great thing about interviewing with other people is I get to take all their ideas, and now I'm equipped.
Well, it goes back to that whole saying, you can't argue someone out of, you can't reason someone out of a position they didn't reason themselves into.
Yeah.
Well, if there's no facts that led to your position, there's no facts that I can argue. There's no arguments. There's no, there's no premises behind any of your conclusions. We cannot have a real debate. We cannot have a real discussion.
Yeah.
It's just us throwing opinions back, unsubstantiated opinions back and forth at each other, which goes nowhere. So, we agreed not to do that any longer.
I see why. With people that we're even entertained by engaging with, if you have a personal relationship with that person, it may inevitably reach, if you take it to the threshold, a point where you really can't go any further than that without jeopardizing the stability, the foundation on which they have a stable lifestyle. And if you start encroaching on that, that's where people start having uncertainty, that type of dissonance. And now immediately, with almost no choice, it's instinctive, we see as the other person putting us in that dissonance as an enemy. And we need space because we need to reclaim our comfort. We need to reclaim our security. God forbid, right? That sends us on this downward spiral where we do have to kind of reevaluate everything. And for some people, when they do reach that point, there's no coming back. There's no return. And
one thing that always drove me nuts when debating with, and this is mostly family members and friends. This is not debating with people who are equipped to do so, who have studied both sides of the arguments and come with hard arguments. These are people who have always assumed the answers, assumed they were correct, and never took the time to learn the arguments against their positions. And once you start debating with people who have those assumptions and that ultimate comfort level, who have maybe never even met an atheist or didn't even know they existed, which sounds bizarre, but I know a lot of them. I know a lot of them who never even knew atheists exist, never even knew that disbelief was an option. When you start debating with them, what you inevitably run up against is, I refuse to believe that.
Yeah.
Which is to me, the most anti-intellectual thing I have ever heard. I
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
refuse to believe that. Is it right or is it wrong? Am I correct or am I incorrect? I refuse to believe that. It just shuts the argument down.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know?
I've had a few of those, and they're absolutely fascinating to me because I tend to think the unspoken things between humans is obvious, and maybe that's just how my mind works because I realize humans are equipped. We have equipped ourselves, whether by tradition or by nurture in our own lifetimes, to pretend and play in roles that the elephant in the room is okay being ignored.
Yes.
I tend to be the opposite. I tend to be like, well, we already know it. Why is it taboo to say out loud? Well,
Yes.
why can't we talk about sexuality? Why can't we talk about the fact that we don't have reasons to believe in what we claim to be certain about in religion? You know, I thought these were okay to talk about until I started talking about them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Because then you get people that we can't do that. You know, oh, it's just too real. It's too much.
well, and you mentioned about once you're a certain age and you've uh, built your whole life on this foundation of beliefs, how destabilizing and uncomfortable it can be to have those beliefs messed with.
Mm,
And I, I, you know, the whole idea of the thinking animal, the fact that we can put that our inquisitive minds and we can put our intelligence on hold in certain areas, and that we can just refuse to apply our critical thinking skills in this area. Because I know some truly intelligent people who are believers, who I see them apply a level of logical and inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning to things in the most abstract things, mathematics and computers and chemistry, things that blow my mind.
yeah.
But then when you ask them to use those same skills on any type of spiritual or cosmological arguments, they can't do it. They refuse to do it. And because they've compartmentalized that part of themselves so that they can apply reason here, but not there. And what's bizarre to me is it's not, I think it's honest when certain people admit that they do that. Like
Yeah.
Tolstoy's Confessions blew my mind when I read that because he basically said the conclusions that reason led him to were, what did he say, too horrible to be believed.
Mm,
And so he decided not to believe. He made a conscious choice to. What's
mm,
more unsettling to me are when people cannot even realize or not even aware that they're doing that they are suspending their reason in this area, that they're not even aware that they're doing that. It is so automatic. They've been taught to do it from such a young age, and it is a natural reflex that they don't even know that they're doing. That is scary to witness.
yeah.
It is really scary to witness. It's almost like talking to someone who has two different, distinct, fully developed personalities.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. That's my family members. That is my family members. My family members aren't. I studied theology in university. Okay, like I'm the furthest. I'm the best Christian of my entire family, and I'm no longer a Christian.
Yeah, yeah.
So the rest of my family just kind of takes it on word, and I've had several conversations with them. I'm like, come on now, if this is true, then this must follow. Did it follow? They'll say no. Well, I'll say, well, then that's not true to begin with, then.
Mm-hmm.
And they do just as you said. People do. They suspend that part of themselves. They're like, too uncomfortable, but I still believe. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Yep, I totally get that argument. Before we shut down the interview, I want to go back to sexuality. Sexuality was something that I struggled with.
Mm-hmm.
I was married the whole time I was a Christian. I got divorced before I deconverted. That was some time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as a man, I always struggled with sexuality because you can't do anything as a man. You can't think about anything. You see the wrong woman walking down the street, like,
Mhm.
and you even think that she's attractive, you already feel guilty. Like it's amazing. Imagine the smallest prison cell that you can be in. That's what conservative Christian males are in.
Yes.
Even admitting you are a sexual human being has got to be sin. you know, and
And what's
but
in my closet is definitely sin.
yeah, right. So here you are, writing books that capitalize off of that prevalent part of
Yes.
human nature. What, like if you were speaking to a Christian man right now and the topic of sexuality came up and you wanted that man to walk away with one idea about sexuality and the role it's supposed to play in his life or can play in his life or whatever, what would you say to him?
So here's the thing that I've always found to be so counterintuitive about religion, and something that to me does not take an extremely critical mind to deduce, is that if you are a Christian and you believe that God gave human beings free will, which is a whole separate argument,
Mm-hmm.
but if you believe that, and that's what distinguishes us from the animals, and that's what allows us to sin, is that we have this free will. And so our free will leads us astray. It leads us into commit acts of perversion and so on and so forth. And that's what we have to atone for when we go to church. Then the animals that do not have free will should not exhibit any of the behaviors that we have decided were sinful, right? Because they are programmed directly by God, if you believe that, to act as they do. But yet in nature, you see homosexuality, you see masturbation, you see orgies, you see adultery, you see all the things, you see polyamory. I mean, you see all the things that religion has told us are sinful, but yet these animals don't have free will. They were programmed by God to be that way.
Yeah.
So shouldn't that give you some pause about what you believe is sinful?
I follow that, and now I want to play devil's advocate and say, yeah, but we're humans. We're different from animals. God doesn't care about those animals' sexuality like he does about humans. After all, we have the Bible. God gave that and inspired that for us to write it, and here we are, and those are God's commands to us.
But why would God then, if his idea of sin is in for us to act like, why would he give us the same desires that he gave these animals? Why would he give us those? If his desire was to separate us completely from the animals, why give us those same instincts and desires?
All right, I follow you. Hey. Help me out with your imagination. I haven't read any of your books, man, but I want to. I'm not a big horror fan. Like, it's just
then you're going to struggle with my books.
yeah. I can say I was captivated by that Mafia book with the Iceman. Like, I was absolutely captivated. Man, I couldn't put that book down.
Yeah.
Violence intrigues us, right? Violent sex intrigues us. Okay, I'll just try to end it here. Why does violent sex intrigue us? Help me out with that, man. I have what I'm going to call minimum exposure with the BDSM or kink community. I have an introduction to that. Let's just call it that.
Yeah, I have maximum exposure.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Hey, help the rest of us out. What's the deal? What's the sell with humanity on violent sexuality? Help us understand ourselves right now.
So, I'm going to speak very broadly, and
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot of people who disagree with it. Let me say that because everyone has their own reason for doing the things they do.
Yeah.
There are some that are adrenaline junkies, and violence definitely gets your adrenaline going. I'm an ex-fighter, by the way. I used to compete in mixed martial arts,
I seen that.
train mixed martial arts fighters, and I did that because I enjoyed the every aspect of it, conquering another human being, even just pushing my body to certain limits.
Yeah.
I enjoyed all of it, and that's the adrenaline junkie part of it. There are some people who enjoy the endorphins,
Yeah.
um, and I would say that's the majority who enjoy the endorphin release that you get when you traumatize your body.
Mhm.
Um, for some, there is the taboo. There is that things that have been traditionally taboo can easily be fetishized.
Yeah.
And uh, for others, um, like myself, I would say it's just wanting to experience everything. We're on this earth for such a short time.
Mhm.
And I read a really great quote the other day that I would rather die with memories than dreams.
Yeah.
And that's how I look at the world too. Is I want to experience everything. There's going to be things that I absolutely don't like and will never want to do again.
Mhm.
There are some things that are going to be wonderful, and I'm going to wonder why I haven't been doing this for the last 48 years. you know, and if I put taboos on things and I put, well, I'm never going to do this, then there are things I'm just never going to experience. And there are things that because of, time, money, proximity, that I will not be able to experience. But anything that's legal and moral, and moral meaning that, between two consenting adults,
Mhm.
that I can gain access to, I'm damn sure going to try it.
Yeah.
And some of it's going to be enjoyable. And I know for me, um, excitement,
Yeah.
is, it feeds me. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. I don't smoke. Never have. Um, but sex is, we're hardwired to enjoy that.
Yeah, we are.
Violence, we're hardwired to enjoy that too.
Yeah.
Are it wouldn't be so common if we were not. We are hardwired to fight and hunt and kill, and that those two instincts might marry. It's not too surprising to me. Food and sex marry all the time. you know.
Wrath, you're inspiring me, man. Like you made me want to do something, man. All right, Wrath. We're gonna wind it down here, man. For any of the viewers watching, Wrath is a writer, among other things. But we're gonna link to some of his content on fullydeconverted.com over on our Learn page. We're honored to have him as a guest, and we would love to host some of his material. And so you'll be able to go find that on fullydeconverted.learn. We might have to come up with our own little fiction section just to put him in there. And even a subcategory fiction sexuality. That's going to be our most popular area on there.
Let's go.
But Wrath, it's been a pleasure having you on, man. Where can people find you?
So I'm mostly on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course Amazon. If you
We'll put that on there
for the bizarre,
yeah.
the violent and the sexual and the blasphemous, then yeah, absolutely give me a love.
Very good, man. We'll host up some of your link on fullydeconverted.com. We'll have that on there so our viewers can reference that. To all the viewers, if you're watching right now, go ahead and hit that like button, support fullydeconverted.com and interviews like this with Wrath so we can talk about things that are taboo, that don't have to be. It don't have to be stigmatized. And if they are taboo, let's just enjoy them a little bit. With that said, Wrath, stay on the line, but tell everybody goodbye.
All right. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.